So I'm going to kick off and grill Paul on the World Handicap system. What we'll do, if that's okay, is we want you to be able to ask us questions afterwards. So you have two options. You can, there's a chat feature on Zoom, so you can, when I ask at the end, you can type in your question, I'll read it out and Paul will answer. Or if you struggle with the chat, you can unmute yourself and ask the question, but please only do so when prompted. Hopefully you all got that. Are you ready, Paul?
Yeah, let's crack on.
Okay, so first question. We're just a week away now from the launch of the World Handicap system, and although I feel as a club we've done a pretty good job getting information out there, I think people still really want to know, in principle, how does the new system differ from the old?
Okay, nice, easy, straightforward opening question, Sean. Thanks for that one. In the very simplest of terms, the new and the old system are very different. The current system, once you have your handicap, it's what's called an incremental system, where your handicap will go up slightly, down slightly, etc., based on your immediately prior performance. So it just goes up and down a little bit from your starting point. The new system is very, very different. It's going to work on an average of your best scores. So every time you play that evening, overnight, the system will be recalculating your personal average of your best 8 scores from your last 20. And when we talk about scores, we are talking scores that you've put into the software, into the club computer. They're the scores that we're concerned about. They're the scores that are going to be average. So the key is your best 8 of your last 20 scores. That's the principle that we need to get our heads around as a starting point. So that would be the essential difference.
So I know one of the questions that I've been asked is, currently at the moment, your handicaps are updated when we close a competition. So if the competition remains open, your handicaps aren't adjusted. Can you tell me a little bit more about the new system and when golfers' handicaps are going to be adjusted?
Okay, there's a fundamental change coming with the way that the competitions and the way the handicaps are administered. Currently, they're all done by one company. As you know, we changed over as a company back in February, March to Club Systems. We use Club V1, and Club V1 currently, as the software provider, they not only process all the competition data to establish winners, etc., etc., but at the same time, they control and maintain and update our handicap records. That's going to change. As from Sunday night, our existing software provider will still maintain and operate our competition activity, but there is a new link in the chain, and all the handicaps worldwide are going to be administered by a company called Dot Golf. They're a New Zealand company, and they will be maintaining the World Handicap system, all our handicaps around the world. So quite a fundamental difference to what we know now. So what will happen going forward? Let's just say, for example, there'd been a Stapleford competition today, and 50 members had put their scores into the competition software. Irrespective of whether we close that competition today or even first thing tomorrow morning, all of those 50 scores that have been put into the system today appertaining to that competition will get updated at midnight tonight, and there is a fair chance that those 50 players will wake up tomorrow morning to find that their handicap may have changed. So irrespective of whether the competition is closed or not. So if you've processed your score, it will update tonight. Your 8 from 20, your best 8 from 20 calculation, your average calculation will run every single night after you have put a score into the system. So that's the sort of key difference there over what we know now.
Okay, thank you. So we keep calling it a handicap. Everyone in the world, in the UK, not the world, but certainly the UK, knows it as a handicap. But I understand they're changing that terminology. Can you let me know and the viewers know what the handicap index and the course handicap is?
Okay, as you alluded to, we've all got some new terminology to come to terms with. As from Monday, we will no longer have a handicap in the purest sense, but we will all operate with a handicap index, and the terminology is really key when it comes down to understanding how many shots we're going to get, etc., etc. So our handicap index will be published on Monday. Some draft numbers are already out there, but they're not up to date. They're not the final article. We'll be awarded our index on Monday, and then we will also convert that before we tee off at any course, whether it be home or away. We'll convert that handicap index into a course handicap, depending on which tees we're going to be using. So, for example, many of you who've been at the club would have seen the large tables that have been displayed at the adjacent to the rear doors to the main clubhouse and on the trolley shed adjacent to the first tee. These are the tables that you need to refer to establish how many shots you are going to get and what your course handicap will be for the round of golf that you're about to play. So, two definitions of handicap going forward: your handicap index, the starting point, which will then be converted into a course handicap relevant to where and what tees you're about to use.
Okay. So those tables are actually really important. They really will become the focal point of your handicap index moving forward. And I can't stress enough, on arrival at the club, every time before you play, please check the tables and just ensure that your handicap index corresponds with your course handicap, and then you go to play the correct tee. So basically what you're saying is that there's a new procedure for golfers at all golf clubs when they arrive. So in that case then, can you just run through what a member will need to do when they arrive at the club and each time they go out to play?
Okay, as we just touched on just now, we don't need to necessarily make it overly complicated, but at all times we all need to know as players what our exact handicap index is. Most of us will probably already know what our exact current handicap is on the old system, so it's not a huge amount different, it's just terminology. So we need to know what our handicap index is at any time. And the intention is that we make that as easy as possible for you to find out that number. It'll be in a variety of places. It'll be accessible via our website, via the app, via the PSI in the hallway at the club, via the WHS platform that some of you have already found your way onto since it was launched last week, and more of that later. But the absolute key is knowing what your index is at any given time. And as we said earlier, that could have changed since the last time you've played. Once you know your index, it really is just a question of checking the chart, checking the poster on the wall, and it does apply to home players. and there should be one in a very prominent position at every club throughout the world as from Monday.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So we'll move on to some questions, which are some of the questions that we've had from members, which don't necessarily relate to your handicap here, but the wider handicap system. So one of those questions is, if our neighbouring courses have a higher slope rating than us, or should I say slope index, does that mean their course is harder?
The simple answer to that is no. You've probably heard of things like the slope index, and that's a really difficult topic to cover on an evening like tonight in this format. It's probably really too detailed. But the intention of the slope index is to try and level out the challenge from player to player and from course to course. And the table is a reflection of the slope index. The slope index that we've been awarded for our white course is 123. And for comparison purposes, a neutral slope index is 113. So our white course is considered to be about 10% more difficult than a standard golf course in the UK or indeed in the world. Our yellow course at 115 is deemed to be around the sort of neutral sort of point. The thing that means that you can't just compare a straight slope rating from one club to another is it really also does depend on how their course has been rated. So for example, our white course is rated at 69.6, which is, as we knew it in old money, the equivalent of the standard scratch. And we have a slope rating for that of 123. But if a course is rated at 72.6 with a slightly lower slope index, then the lower slope index doesn't mean that course is necessarily easier. The assessment of how difficult a course is depends on both factors in tandem. That's the course rating and the slope index, rather than just looking at one of those numbers in isolation.
Okay. I can see a few of you are scratching your heads. Please don't panic, and especially you, Steve. Please don't panic. The system is here to make this simple. The mechanics behind are complicated, but hopefully once we get going, you'll understand them better. You touched on something there about our handicaps and travelling with them. One of the things that I've certainly heard since I've been at the club is, as a club, we've often suffered that our handicaps don't travel too well, certainly in club matches. Do you think the World Handicap System will level that out or have an impact?
I think we need to be careful that we don't get sucked into thinking that it's going to solve all the problems in one foul swoop, where our handicaps may not travel as well as we would like them to. I think it's going to make a significantly positive difference. I think it's going to help us quite a lot. If we were to try and compare ourselves to, say, a very tough golf course like, say, Carnoustie, we all know that a 12 handicapper at Littlehampton Golf Club will not be anywhere near as good a golfer as a 12 handicapper at Carnoustie. That golfer at Carnoustie will have gained his 12 handicap in much more testing and challenging circumstances. So at the moment, if those two golfers were to play each other, we know more than likely there is only going to be one winner. Going forward, the idea of the handicap index is that the index will not relate to where you play or where you gained your handicap. So the intention of the index is that it'll be sanitized, it'll be de-sloped, And the likelihood is that the Carnoustie golfer, as from next Monday, that currently plays off 12, is probably going to have a handicap index of maybe, say, 8. And the Littlehampton golfer that plays off 12 might have a handicap index of, say, 11. So immediately we can see that there's an improving situation for the Littlehampton golfer, because the handicap index having been sanitized so that they don't reflect where the golf has been played or where the scores have been posted, the indexes will start from a different place. So in answer to your question, very hopeful that the indexes will be a greater leveler from the home and away basis.
So Paul said yes.
I think so, with reservations.
This is a good one. We still get this question now. Does a member have to put a card in every time they play golf?
Okay, as many of you will know, the development of the World Handicap System has been going on for quite a few years now, and we've been attending briefing sessions on the topic for probably up to 2 years. At the very early briefing sessions, it was suggested that all golfers, all members, every time they play, would need to submit a score. And let me assure you, there was considerable pushback at those meetings from those in attendance, that we didn't feel that's what our members wanted. They enjoyed their roll-ups, they enjoyed the informality, they enjoyed some of their own systems, ways of playing, own handicap systems, fines, changed handicaps, penalties, all sorts of stuff, and that they wanted to retain some of that sociability, some of that informality going forward. Fortunately, powers that be have listened. So the situation now going forward is it is entirely up to members to determine as and when they want to post a score. They do need to make the decision prior to teeing off, as opposed to just putting in their good cards or maybe just putting in their bad cards. So it's down to you. It's down to you, the member, rather like the supplementary card system that we have now. You, if you wish, can elect for your score prior to play to count on your handicap record. But if you choose not to, that's entirely up to you. There's a few little interesting asides to that, because if, for example, you belong to a golf society and you're going off to play golf at, say, Worthing on Friday this week, you can, if you wish, providing you elect to, before teeing off, you can have that score as part of your handicap record going forward. So you can use some of these circumstances. If you have a bona fide handicap index and you're a member of a golf club, you can have that score as part of your record going forward if you wish. So that's an interesting aside. So no need to panic. Things can continue as they do now. Social golf, informal golf, very much a part of life going forward at the golf club.
So touching on that though, if it's up to the member, if they're not playing in many competitions and it's up to the member to submit the card, is there a minimum number of cards a member must submit annually?
No, going forward, the minimum requirement to submit cards annually has been taken away. So once you have your handicap index on Monday of next week, there is no minimum requirement as to how many cards you then submit. So your handicap won't lapse. There'll be no such thing as inactive and active, no such thing as competition handicap, or you haven't got the dreaded C, beside your handicap number. So once you have your index, you keep it going forward forever and a day. providing you retain your club membership.
Okay, good one. I'm sure there'll be quite a few happy members to hear that, because I know certainly with COVID we've had quite a few handicaps lapse this year. So what do we do? What does a member do if after November the 2nd they feel their handicap index is wrong? Where can they go?
Good question. I think the answer to that question is see Sean. No, sorry, he wouldn't like me to tell you that. I think our stance as a handicap committee, and we've discussed this, is the handicap index that's awarded to all of us as players as from next week is factual. It's a number that has been calculated based on the data that you have put into the handicap record. It's your scores, it's your competition results, it's your performances over up to a 3-year period. And I appreciate that if they've spanned a long spell of time, they may not be as accurate as you or I would like them to be. But it's the handicap index you're going to be awarded. As a handicap committee, we feel very strongly that we do not want to keel over and just give in to the first time that we receive a challenge from a member as to the number they've been awarded. We're happy to talk to them, but the likelihood is that we're not going to make a change to the initial number that's been awarded. As a committee, we have a duty to all of the members, not just to those that flag up and shout loudly that their handicap index is wrong, inverted commas. We'll look at the facts, we'll talk it through with them, but it is very unlikely that we are going to be making changes. If we make changes, we would rather make them based on evidence, based on fact, based on additional scores or cards that they are putting into their record. And bear in mind that the more scores and the more numbers going into someone's record, it can fairly quickly update. They're 8 from 20, it's updating every time a score goes in. So whereas now, with the existing system, people feel that sometimes they are penalised heavily for one golden day or one good card, in the future, the averaging of 8 from 20 is more likely to be more representative or more fully reflective of how they're playing. There is an exception to that. If someone has suffered sort of medically or through injury, and therefore feels there is good justification for the handicap committee maybe taking a closer look at the index that's been awarded, then yes, of course, we'll be happy to do that. But for someone marching in just saying the new system's rubbish, the number's wrong, it is not likely to be met with a concession or a sympathetic stance and a new number awarded, because it would defeat the whole object of where we're going with this. It's been done mathematically, it's based on fact, and for us to just capitulate and change someone's index for the person that shouted the loudest, we don't feel would ethically or morally be the right way of going.
Okay. So this actually is probably a good time to mention the platform. I think that would be a good time now. Many of you have probably seen an email that came out from England Golf about the World Handicap System platform. This was a member platform in which you could register and log in and see your handicap index and your data that led to receiving that index. Now, I know some clubs have sent that email out to members, telling them and encouraging them to look, and you may have noticed that we haven't done that. There is a reason, which I will pass over to Paul to explain, and hopefully you'll understand why we have not encouraged members to look at that information just yet.
Okay, yeah, the platform went live in the middle of last week. In layman's terms, it's basically a sort of a website which, as we talked earlier, it's run by .golf. They're the people that are the world authority at processing all our data for handicap purposes, and it's going to contain lots of fantastically detailed information, graphs relating to your own performance, where you sit in the world with regards to sort of ranking. Are you in the top 10% of golfers in Littlehampton, or the top 20% in your road? Are you in the top 50% in your household, for some cases? So there's going to be lots of data, lots of interesting stuff, lots of historical graphs and performance analysis and so on from there. It has gone live. You can get on there, and we're going to tell you later how to do that. But our slight reservation was it does quote on there and show you on there what your provisional handicap index is as from Monday next week, but it's not up to date. And we felt a bit uncomfortable letting members look at their new handicap index when it doesn't contain any data from the 2nd of October onwards. And for those that are churning out qualifying competitions 1, 2, 3 a week, and I can see some faces in front of me that absolutely do that, they're going to take one look at the number, and it doesn't contain their last 6 or 7 qualifiers.
Correct.
Well, when that's 6 or 7 qualifiers out of 20, and we're looking at best 8 from 20, the data is a little bit behind the clock. The answer that we were given to that query was it's an indicative number, and it's to let members get a feel and a flavour for what facilities and options are available on the platform that they will be able to use to good effect in due course. So that's the background behind it. We are going to make it available for you to have a look at, but please do bear in mind that the index on there is not cast in stone. It will be updated come Monday morning when you all set your alarms and get up early to have a look at what you've got. But yes, by all means, crack on and have a look tomorrow.
Good. Down to my last 2 questions, and then we're going to open the floor. Paul, can you explain 0.1 increases, buffer zones, and CSS? Can you explain that under one umbrella for everyone, please?
Okay, well, they are all phrases or pieces of terminology that we will see the demise of. The 0.1 increase bites the dust from Sunday night this weekend. So it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for us to predict what's going to happen to our handicaps. We all know that if we have a bad day out there on the links, we know sure as eggs are eggs that we're likely to go up 0.1 come the closing of that competition, unless horrendously bad scores and horrendously bad weather come to our rescue, making the competition reductions only. We pretty much know where our handicap is headed. Likewise, if we've had a great day, we also have got a pretty good idea what's likely to happen to our handicap in the very near future, be it a 0.2 or a 0.4 or 0.6 or whatever reduction in that handicap. That's all going to change. There'll be no CSS, there'll be no buffer zones, there'll be no 0.1 increases, because the whole thing is going to work on absorbing that new score into your record and constantly recalculating what are your best 8 scores and what's the average of those best 8, and that then becomes your new number the following morning. Now, I know that there will be people on here tonight and within the club that will be watching their own records very closely and will absolutely know what their best 8 are, and when one of their best 8 is very close to falling off their record, etc., etc. And there will also be as many, if not infinitely more, who have no idea what their best 8 are, and they're really not bothered because they'll just play their golf, write their score down, put it in the system, and they'll take their new handicap index the following morning when it pops up on their phone or on their computer or whatever. Both ways are fine. It really is down to the individual. But a lot of terminology disappearing because it's just going to be best 8 from 20 on a rolling basis.
So you kind of answered my last question in one there. So question time, I'm done. Paul, thank you for that. That was a good grilling. Hopefully everyone understood and took in what you said then and maybe generated some questions from it as well. Paul, was there anything else we wanted to do before we go to the questions?
No, I'm waiting with bated breath to see who's going to try and trip us up.
So at this stage, I'm going to come behind the camera so I can read the chat, and I'll be firing any questions over to Paul. So if you could just give us 30 seconds. Okay, so I've got Paul Kelly. Can you explain the 95%?
Thanks, Paul. That was a nice hospital pass, that one. What we haven't covered on tonight's presentation is that when we arrive at the tee currently to play our golf, particularly if we're playing match play or something like that, a discussion normally takes place amongst the 4 players or whatever as to what the shot situation is. And that will still be the same going forward, depending on whether you're going out to play a 4-ball better ball or a greensome or a foursomes. The shot situation discussion still needs to take place. So what we haven't covered tonight is to what those allowances will be going forward. Now, generally speaking, I don't think I'm going to go through all the different allowances for all the different formats of play, but we will publish that and make that available for you to look at. But what Paul has focused on is one of the allowances, and what it's basically saying is that the allowance for an individual going out to play a Stapleford or medal round is 95% of their course handicap. So I can see Jan in the screen. So we'll use Jan as an example. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jan. We know you're a good player, but if Jan is gets a handicap index of, let's say he gets 9.3, the chances are when he checks the table to play off the white tees, the chances are his course handicap at Littlehampton off the whites is going to be 10. They're all full numbers, exact numbers, the course handicaps. So Jan will have a course handicap off the whites to play his individual Stapleford of 10. His allowance is 95% of 10. Okay? So his allowance for playing an individual Stapleford or an individual medal round will be 95% of 10. Now I know, based on the briefings that we've done at the club so far, that there would, if we unmuted you all, there would be a collective groan for a start, because no one likes wanting to calculate what 95% of. We've made it really easy for Jan. 95% of 10 is pretty good. But for someone that's wanting to take 95% of 23 or 95% of 37, things aren't suddenly looking quite so straightforward. The club stance on the 95% is we are recommending to all players that they play off their course handicap. So they go out to play. So Jan would take his 9.4 index that becomes 10 once he looks at the table beside the first tee. We are recommending to Jan that he plays his individual Stapleford round off 10 and marks his card accordingly off 10 and puts it into the system off 10, the system will then do the necessary calculation regarding the 95%. And we believe that that will be the simplest way of dealing with that issue for an individual round, getting the 95% allowance. What it does mean is it does mean that in certain instances, the points that you will see come up on the system will differ slightly to the points that you might have thought you had earned, because obviously the system's factored into the 95% and you haven't, by way of your marking of your scorecard. That, we believe, is the simplest way of dealing with it. I appreciate, I may not have answered the question as to why. The only answer I can give as to why is that the answer that we've received when we've queried it, because we groaned heavily as well as administrators when this message was delivered to us. The answer given is that having crunched many thousands of numbers, it is perceived as necessary in order for the system to be equitable for all players. So it sounds really woolly, it's not intended as a cop-out, but having crunched all the numbers, it is perceived as a necessary calculation to be fair across the board rather than without that 95%.
Okay, thank you for that, Paul. Hopefully that explains slightly. Before I go on to the next question, we don't have many questions coming in, so we're going to take that as if you're happy and content, but if not, please fire your questions over to us. We're happy to answer them.
Or demute.
Or demute and shout out. So next question before you shout out is from Paul Holton. And the question is, will the white and yellow and red T ratings change if the weather is particularly bad, or will our T ratings be static?
Okay, good question, Paul. Thanks for that. It would appear that only people with a Christian name of Paul seem to want to answer questions tonight. The answer to that, Paul, is the course ratings will remain as published. So your 69.6 for the whites with the slope rating of 1, 2, 3, they are pretty much cast in stone. I'll come back to that in a minute, and the reason I said pretty much. But yes, to all intents and purposes, they will stay as is. What will happen for bad weather? At the end of the playing day, as part of the overnight transmission, a calculation will take place called a PCC, a playing conditions calculation. It's very similar to how the existing CSS is calculated. We all know, particularly at this club, on a horrendously challenging day, and we might have 2 or 3 of those days ahead of us this week, we know that once those scores are put into the system, those scores carry with them a message. And if everyone is coming in with less than 30 points because there's 40-mile-an-hour winds, the system will know through those results that it has been exceptionally challenging out there. And we normally find that the CSS in old money goes up by 1, 2, maybe even 3 shots. There is no CSS in future. It's been replaced by the playing conditions calculation. And the playing conditions calculation will look at all scores registered in that preceding day's play, and it will make a similar allowance in the overnight transmission. So no changes to the rating, no changes to slope indexes, but an allowance will be considered based on the scores that have been processed by way of the PCC. I have to say, personally, I'm a little nervous as to whether the PCC is going to cope with clubs like ours, because it's been suggested to us that the PCC is not likely to be as volatile as the existing CSS is. But I think we have to wait and see on that. They're the sorts of things we'll be looking at quite closely. From a consolation point of view, let's just say that we feel as golfers a little hard done by, that the PCC hasn't treated us very kindly after a very tough day out on the course. Do bear in mind that that score that you feel a bit hard done by hopefully won't find its way anywhere close to being in your best 8. Bearing in mind your handicap index is only going to be governed or controlled by your best 8 cards at any given time. Let's hope that all of us won't be too sensitive over an extremely windy day, a tough score, not much help maybe from the PCC, and feeling a bit put out. Do bear in mind the saving grace. If it's not going to feature in your best 8, then it might be a little academic anyway. Hope that answers that for you, Paul.
Thank you.
I think, can I just go on and have a supplementary on that? What I thought Paul was going to say, a question that might crop up, is our course rating of 69.6 for the whites and our slope rating, they could change in future if we make significant changes to the golf course. If we, if we had the land to put lots of new tees in and significantly extend the course, if we doubled the amount of bunkers on the course, if we halved the width of the fairways, if we suddenly made all the greens, rather than being flat, really undulating, if those factors were to very much change the challenge of our golf course, then our course rating could change in future and our slope rating could change in future. But they are the likely factors that would affect those, not those, other than those type of factors, playing conditions, weather, etc., aren't going to make any effect on course rating or slope.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And Paul, thank you for asking. I've just received a text message, so question by text message. Paul, is there a limit to how much somebody's handicap can rise in a year? So if he or she has a horror run all summer, let's say in 2019, can a player see a big rise as a result? I'm sure a few people can guess who that's from. And
I think I might know.
and if you're not sure, that's our previous captain, Andy Clark.
Thanks, Andy. As we alluded to just now, with the averaging system, someone's handicap could change sort of quite quickly if they're putting lots of cards in quick succession. So the answer to that is built into the system. There are, and we're getting now into sort of quite technical stuff, there are what are called soft caps and hard caps. Some have suggested the hard cap is what I might need next week when everyone sees what their new handicap indexes are, but that's another matter. The built into the system, there is a what we probably best describe as an anchor point. So if someone has been an 8 handicap golfer and they have this terrible run that we've just talked about, at a certain point that they get a long way, no, at the point that they get a certain distance away from their anchor point of 8, the system will say, no, hang on. We're not going to let Andy Clark or someone else, just picked Andy's name at sort of total random. We're not going to let Andy Clark become a 17 handicap golfer because he's been on a bad run, but he's capable and has demonstrated his ability to play to 8. So we are going to cut him off at 13 and we are going to keep referring back to his anchor point for a 12-month period to stop him getting too far away from that. So you can go onto the England Golf website if you want to really drill into how the soft cap and the hard cap work. But in answer to the question, there is a a fail-safe built into the system that will prevent someone getting too far away from their low point, their low index, their anchor point, so to speak.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So we have no more questions on the chat. Oh, here we go. Hang on. We got Paul Kelly back again. Thank you, Paul. Somebody mentioned that all of our handicaps will rise slightly under the new system. Is that the case? Well, I can actually answer this because mine has actually come down a shot. So mine hasn't risen, mine's come down.
That's a really difficult question to answer. I think it very much depends on how many cards you've put into the system and over what period of time. So, for example, if you've only got 5 cards or 10 cards, say, in the system in the last 3 years, the standard to which you are playing at the moment might be quite adrift from how you come out. I'd be inclined to say for an awful lot of regular competition players who play a lot of their competition golf off the whites, I think your handicap index is more likely to be slightly lower than you are at the moment. And the reason being, we talked earlier about the sanitizing of your handicap index, of it not wanting to reflect where you play your golf. Bear in mind, you've been playing your golf on a slope index of 123, and we want your handicap index to be relatively neutral. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if our regular white tee competition golfers saw their handicap index, their opening handicap index, come out at a level that might be, say, about 10% lower than where it is at the moment. But that's a very sweeping statement. It's very difficult to generalize. But the statement that Paul made, that we should expect our handicaps generally to go up, is not one that I would subscribe to.
Okay.
That's certainly not the case.
Paul says thanks, so thank you for that. So that's all the questions we have on chat. If you would like to ask a question via the video, please unmute yourself now and fire any question off to Paul you might have.
They're all too shy.
As we wait in anticipation. No. A few more seconds. No. Heather? No. Nothing from the captain. John? No. One second. I think the John, you there?
Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Anything to add, Mr. Captain?
Just with reference to that last question about handicaps going up or down, I had a look today. I'm off 12.2 at the moment, and the system gave me 11.7, which means I actually would get 13 as a handicap, sorry, as a course handicap, which means 95% of that is 12.3. So it's very close to what I'm playing off at the moment.
Exactly. Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks for sharing that, John.
And just to add to that, I'd like to thank you both very much for doing this tonight. It's been very interesting.
That's okay. Paul's going to take me out for a curry now.
Oh, brilliant.
On that note, thank you, John. Thanks for coming on. I don't think we've got any more questions. Paul, do you have anything else to add?
No. Thanks for tuning in. Hope it's been worthwhile for you. Always happy to take questions from any individuals that would seek further clarification. Please share your newfound knowledge with your playing partners and so on, because you are now officially all experts. So please feel free to share that with others. Did you want to just clarify about the access to the platform?
Yes, well, the access to the World Handicap System platform, which we referred to earlier, I'm sure you can find it yourself, but I think we are still going to send a link out, aren't we?
We'll send a note out tomorrow.
We'll send a note out with the link, and you can pop yourselves on there and register. Other than that, have a great evening, and thanks for joining us. See you later.